Spain was one of the most insignificant powers of 19th-century Europe and was becoming more and more powerless with each passing day. Spain was not only losing its importance, but was also experiencing major problems at home. Economic crises, political stalemates, inadequacies in production, coups, cultural polarizations, etc. led the country into chaos. The chaos in Spain became so chronic that the people almost could not see the day. The bad trend continued in the 20th century. After World War I, authoritarian leaders seized power in Spain, as in most European countries. General Miguel Primo de Rivera declared himself dictator on the 13th of September 1923 by making a pronunciamiento. Despite this, he left King Alfonso VIII untouched and left him on the throne. Although Miguel Primo initially received support from the people, his plans to modernize Spain lacked both judgment and good fortune. His authoritarian attitude towards the people was increasing day by day. In the increasingly repressive regime, a political opposition developed in left liberal and intellectual circles. When the voice of the opposition united under the name Alianza Republican became louder, the dictator asked the army for help. When the army did not give him the support he expected, he resigned to the king in 1930 and left the country. King Alfonso appointed new generals and tried to form a government, but when he could not get it together, he decided to hold local elections. In the elections held in April 1931, socialists and liberals took all the important cities. The euphoria of victory led to the fall of the government, and the Republican Committee proclaimed the Republic on the 14th of April. By the end of the year, Niceto Alcala Zamora, president of the Republican Committee, became president and Manuel Azaña was appointed to form a government. The beginning of the Second Republican era in Spain did not heal the wounds. The already existing chaos deepened. The divisiveness of radical ideologies had already turned brothers into faceless strangers. The Royalists were engaged in a relentless struggle with the Republicans, the rightists with the leftists, the supporters of the central government with the Catalonian and Basque independence supporters, the Catholic conservatives with the secularists, the Catholic conservatives with the secularists, the establishment with the anarchists, the workers with the employers, the landowners with the dispossessed, the middle class with the rich, the liberals with the statists, the capitalists with the socialists. Spain was going down day by day in the anarchism of ideologies. The left-leaning coalition governments could not recover the situation. First of all, the leftists had no cadres. They lacked staff in the bureaucracy and the military. This prevented them from being a full-fledged government. They also could not get overwhelming support from the people in the elections. The leftist parties were constantly arguing among themselves, sometimes needing right-wing parties to form a coalition. In fact, they did not fully believe in the Republic either. They were using the new regime to eliminate those with opposing views. Of course, it was impossible for the Republic to survive in an environment where no one believed in the Republic. Actions such as the banning of the Jesuits, the nationalization of private lands, the purges in the army, and the granting of property to Catalonia gradually increased the opposition of the right against the Spanish left. On the other hand, the effects of the economic crisis of 1929 completely collapsed the Spanish economy. In this process, especially the Falange Española de las Juntas de Ofensiva Nacional Sindicalista, in short Falangists, became stronger. The Falange was a small radical party founded by José Antonio Primo de Rivera, the son of the aforementioned dictator Miguel Primo, against the communists intending to overthrow the Republic. In popular terms, they were seen as the Spanish counterparts of the Nazis in Germany and the fascists in Italy, but the Falange was different from them. While the other two used historical symbols as propaganda tools, the Falange was really very attached to tradition, and Catholicism was its main feature. This small party was to play a major role in the future, as the Republic wobbled day by day. Spain went into the 1936 elections polarized from top to bottom. The previous election results and the electoral system forced the parties to form coalitions, destroying the center and deepening radicalization. The depth of feeling of the right and the left was too strong for democracy to work. Both sides resorted to an apocalyptic language that conveyed the expectations of their followers towards a violent, not political, outcome. The winning side was eager to silence those who did not think like it. While the right-wing parties united as the Royalist Nationalist Front on the Seda side led by Gil Robles, the left-leaning parties united under the name of the Popular Front and entered the election. Manuel Azaña became first head of government and then head of state. Although the government was formed by the left Republicans of the liberal Azaña, the radical left parties of the Popular Front were drunk with victory. They took to the streets with the aim of making a revolution. They released prisoners from jail, and their leaders spoke of transforming Spain into a socialist republic with the Soviet Union, and that the organized proletariat would overtake and destroy everything until we reached our goal. The right-wingers, who already did not believe in a republic, felt threatened and were convinced that they would not be able to achieve the Spain of their minds through parliament or justice. 40 The Falange, on the other hand, grew stronger after the elections and began to clash with leftists in the streets with 30,000 armed militants. 40 The Spanish army of 100,000 men, of whom were in the colonial territories in Morocco, was in a miserable state, and according to some, the army did not even have a day's supply of ammunition in case of war, although it had the strength to make its presence felt in domestic politics. 1936 After the elections in 1945, some high-ranking conservative officers in the army feared that the new government and its allies would bring communism to the country, raising the possibility of a coup d'état. The government exiled suspected officers immediately after the elections. General Franco was removed from his post as Chief of Staff and appointed Commander of the Canary Islands. Manuel Godoy Lopez was removed as Inspector General and made General of the Balearic Islands. Emilio Mola was appointed Military Commander of Pamplona in Navarra from his post as head of the African Army. The government had made a big mistake. It had taken Emilio Mola, the main planner of the coup, from Faston and brought him to the mainland. Mola was the main planner of the coup, but the symbolic leader was to be General José Sanjurjo, who was in exile in Portugal. Mola also wanted the civilian militia to support the coup alongside the military. This would involve the Phalangists who were fighting in the streets. With Spain in turmoil after Azaña and the government hesitated to intervene in the crisis, General Mola ordered the troops to leave their garrisons on the 18th of July 1936. General Gómez Morado, the commander of the troops in the Spanish Fauna, revolted and took over the area. Franco ordered his troops to take to the streets in Las Palmas, where they were joined by the Phalangists. Franco took over the forces in Morocco on the same day. General K. Padalano took control in Seville, while Mola took over in Pamplona. Although officers in garrisons all over the country tried to come out of their barracks for the coup, the entire army did not support the coup, as there were also Republican officers and generals. This paved the way for conflict among the military. The situation became complicated when paramilitary fanatics of both the right and the left took the field. By the end of July, the coup supporters were in control from Galicia to Leon, from Navarre to northern Aragon. Asturias and the Basque region were in the hands of the Republicans. In Andalusia, the putschists were able to take control of very few towns and cities. In order for the uprising to go forward, the army of 40,000 people in the Fast had to come to the mainland. By the end of July, the nationalists had a force of 130,000, including 17 generals and 10,000 officers and paramilitary forces, while the Republicans had a force of 90,000, including 22 generals and 7,000 officers and paramilitary forces. Of course, these were the numbers at the beginning of the series of events that turned from a coup attempt into a civil war. In the following period, the forces of the parties would exceed even 1 million with the support from outside. Although Spain was a country that was not worth intervening in the eyes of Europe, it became a medium where the rising powers of Europe before World War II would make small power experiments. The great powers found the opportunity to test their own power in the Spanish Civil War. The United States did not intervene in the situation due to its domestic policy. France and Britain were content to be spectators. Their attitude was a great advantage for Italy, Germany and Portugal, who supported the nationalists from the very beginning of the event. Hitler and especially Mussolini became the de facto supporters of the nationalists in many areas such as soldiers, tanks, ships and weapons. Small groups of Irish, Romanians and Yugoslavs also supported the nationalists. The biggest supporter of the Republicans was the Soviet Union. Although Stalin did not volunteer much, he passed the old ones to the Popular Front wing. The Republicans would use Russian planes and tanks in the Civil War. Mexico, Poland and Greece also supported the Republicans. In addition, communist parties in different countries of the world would form international brigades and pour into Spain to fight on behalf of the Republicans. When General José Sanjurjo died in a plane crash in the first days of the coup attempt, Miguel Cabanillas became the leader in Granor. It was essential for the coup to continue that General Franco, one of the leading figures, be able to cross from Morocco to the homeland, but the navy remained loyal to the Republicans and Franco was trapped in Morocco. Hitler's aeroplanes and Mussolini's ships intervened and carried Franco and his men ashore. Franco only made it to Cadiz on 6 August 1936, then on to Seville, where he divided his troops into two columns, called Africa Nistka, to control Andalusia and to get closer to the capital Madrid, where General Varela was to deal with Andalusia. He went to besieged Granada and consolidated the position of the nationalists there, then moved on to Córdoba, stabilizing it for their part, before heading south and entering Ronda on the 18th of September. The other group from Seville was led by Lieutenant Colonel Yugui. He marched north with the main body of the African army, first to Merida, then on to Badajoz on the Portuguese border, where he took the town in a skirmish, captured the town of Naval Moral de Mata, and set out for Madrid on the 3rd of September. General Franco chose to break through the siege of Alcaraz in Toledo and bring reinforcements to the nationalists instead of heading for Madrid. Franco gained great prestige when the African army achieved its objective and relieved Toledo. In the north, General Mola was engaged in an offensive in the Basque Country to cut the Republicans off from the French border, and he succeeded. At the end of September, the nationalist generals met in Salamanca. Although reluctant, they elected Franco as their leader and declared him president of the country. On the left, the government changed and a broad coalition government was formed, comprising elements of the Popular Front. The right-wingers, despite their differences of opinion, were able to rally around a single leader until they achieved their goals, but the left-wingers were different. They quarreled constantly over differences of opinion. Franco now decided to march on Madrid. Mola, as the man who would lead the campaign, marched confidently on the capital in October 1936. Fighting broke out in the south of the city in early November. World opinion was confident that Madrid, with German and Italian air support, would fall quickly. The Republicans transferred the government to Valencia and began preparations under primitive conditions. They put General José Miaja in charge of the defense. The available troops were inadequate and untrained, so they formed paramilitary groups of communists and anarchists. But what really gave them hope was the timely arrival of Soviet aid. Russian aircraft and especially T-26 tanks gave the Republicans a lifeline, and brigades of foreign volunteers were trained for the defense. The nationalists attacked Madrid from the southwest and west, accompanied by German Panzer I tanks. Although the squares, streets and avenues turned into a battlefield, Madrid could not fall. The Republican front was resisting with all its might. The clashes were followed by air raids. German Junkers 52s and Italian Savoia 81s bombed the city non-stop, but the situation still did not change. The Madrid attack would turn into an event in which the whole world would intervene more. After this failure, Franco attacked the La Corona road in order to surround the city from the north. In the battles that lasted until January 1937, the Republicans abandoned the road. Fighting on other fronts continued to grow with new recruits. Mussolini offered Franco all the help he could, while Hitler sent the Condor Legion to fight in Spain. Following the fall of Zaragoza to the Nationalists on the Aragon front in the north, Franco's troops, with Italian support, easily took the city of Malaga from the Republicans in January 1937. Franco planned with Schubach a pincer movement in the center. One column was to cross the Jarama River south of Madrid and cut off the road to Valencia, while the other column was to capture Guadalajara from the north. Franco, without waiting for the northern troops to prepare, launched an offensive from the south with German support on the 6th of February. At the Battle of Jarama, where even olive branches bled, the Nationalists did not get what they wanted. Although they crossed the river, they were stopped by the Republicans. The second column of the pincer nevertheless intended to attack. Most of the troops on this side were Italian. The Italians attacked the Republicans on the 8th of March, armed with Fiat tankettes and T-26s. In the Battle of Guadalajara, which continued until the end of March, the Republicans achieved their greatest success so far and pushed their enemies back. In this unfavorable picture, Franco began to listen more to what the Germans said. Forced by the siege of Madrid, Franco turned to the Bay of Biscay, where the Republicans were weakest. The situation for the Republicans in Asturias, Cantabria and the Basque region was bleak. The Carlosian-Navarre Division and the German Condor Legion formed the main nucleus of the troops that would attack the north under the command of General Mola. The attack on the Basque region began at the end of March. Fierce fighting continued throughout April and May. On the 3rd of June, General Molin died in a plane crash and was replaced by General Davia. Davia ordered an attack on Bilbao on the 12th of June and the city fell on the 19th of June. The Republicans believed they were strong enough and planned an offensive to clear the Nationalists from in front of Madrid. They planned to break through the Nationalist forces from north to south. With some 80,000 men, they attacked on the 6th of July. With some 80,000 men, they launched the Battle of Brunet on the 6th of July. After 3 weeks, they failed to achieve anything worthwhile, losing all their offensive forces and failing to achieve their objectives. With the offensive in the center halted, General Davia reorganized in the north and attacked again in August. The Italians, Germans and Franco's Spaniards charged into Cantabria. The Republicans retreated to Asturias, while the repressions surrendered. The Republicans attacked the Aragon capital of Zaragoza on the same day that Santander fell in order to halt the Nationalist advance north. In this battle, called the Battle of Belchite, the Republicans were initially successful, but they were unable to take Zaragoza and retreated. The Nationalists, free of any problems that might arise behind them, marched on their enemies, who had retreated into the Asturian mountains. The Republicans fought a guerrilla war in the mountains until October 1937, when they finally gave up. 1937, the autumn of 17, was a period when the number of minuses written on the left wing's scorecard increased. They had lost their offensive power in the center at the Battle of Brunet, in Aragon at the Battle of Belchite, and had been completely driven out of the territories in the Bay of Biscay. The strife among themselves was a separate scourge. Opposition to the government was growing. The left-wing parties could not reconcile and even fought each other in Catalonia. The inability of the left to unite led to a civil war within a civil war on the Republican wing. General Franco, whose seat of government was in Burgos, was quite relaxed. Thanks to German and Italian aid, he was in a superior position against the Republicans, whom the British and French were hesitant to support. As the winter season came, both sides tried to pull themselves together. The armed forces of the parties were now up to 700,000. The Republicans planned an attack on the Tranquil Bulge, which they thought was weak, in order to turn the situation in their favor. They attacked and took Tranquil on the 15th of December in the middle of the Black Winter. Preparing for the Madrid offensive, Franco ignored the Allies and pursued the Tranquil defeat. 1938, Franco spent the first months of the war shifting troops here and taking the city. He captured the city on the 22nd of February, fighting his troops on the snow in the bleak atmosphere of winter. After this crushing victory, Franco turned not to Madrid but to Catalonia. Catalonia, along with the Basque region, was one of the country's industrial centers and an economic stronghold of the Republicans. 150,000 troops under General Davia went on the offensive on the 7th of March. The air and ground bombardment, the advance of the tanks and the accompaniment of the infantry was like a test of the German blitzkrieg operation. Many soldiers and officers fled, and the retreat turned into a rout. The Nationalists took the town of Bineros on the 15th of April, splitting the Republicans in two. In May 1938, the Republican government sought reconciliation, but Franco demanded unconditional surrender, destroying any hope of peace. He made the grave mistake of directing his armies towards Valencia instead of Catalonia. In the summer of that year, Franco's armies advanced to the front of Valencia, but were unexpectedly defeated by resistance north of the city. In the south, General Llano was busy trimming the Republican bulge stretching to the Portuguese border. While the Nationalists labored in vain, the Republicans in Catalonia regained their strength with the opening of the border with France. With the help of the aid they received across the border, they recruited everyone from 7 to 70 and prepared for the attack. They hoped to create a public echo by winning a victory, and they wanted to sit at the table with Franco with their hands stronger. But there was something they missed. The German entry into Czechoslovakia and the British lenient treatment of the Germans had changed the focus of public opinion, and the Spanish Civil War had fallen to the bottom of the agenda. The Republicans formed an army dominated by communists. They would cross the Ebro River and advance to Valencia. In line with the plan, the Republican army crossed the river on the 25th of July. When the Nationalists, who did not expect an attack, acted practically and shifted their divisions to the region, the biggest battle of the Civil War began. Until October, the Spaniards fought each other's eyes out for votes. In the scorching heat of summer, they gave each other hell without giving up. In the end, the loser of the Battle of Ebro, which turned into a massacre, was the Republicans, who retreated north of the river. The Republicans, who suffered about 50,000 casualties in Ebro, were now in a miserable state. Although the Nationalists also suffered heavy losses in Ebro, they were capable of recovering themselves. For the invasion of Catalonia, Franco assembled a force of 340,000 soldiers, around 300 tanks, 500 aircraft and 1,400 artillery pieces, while the Republicans' total force consisted of 220,000 soldiers, most of them without rifles, 40 tanks and around 250 artillery pieces. The Nationalist offensive began on the 23rd of December, and the army, advancing in droves, took Barcelona on the 25th of January and looted it savagely, Franco's paramilitaries committing acts that made the city's inhabitants redefine savagery. The rottenness of the Civil War was once again on display. The desire of a civilian armed with a gun to slaughter his brother who did not think like him was perhaps the height of inhumanity. In the following days, Franco's army took tens of thousands of prisoners and captured the rest of Catalonia. 500,000 Republicans and Catalans crossed to France as refugees. Some migrated by sea to Republican areas. The invasion of Catalonia ended on the 10th of February 1939. There seemed to be nothing left for the Republicans to do. Few generals and ministers returned to the center of Spain. President Azania resigned after France and Britain formally recognized Franco's rule. Prime Minister Negrin returned to Madrid and called for resistance, but unity on the left was completely broken. Some of the generals formed a junta, took over and demanded peace from Franco. But the nationalist forces preferred to advance rather than make peace. Franco's armies entered Madrid on the 28th of March without resistance. 31 With the surrender of the last Republican League, Franco declared his victory by radio broadcast on the 1st April 1939. This victory gave Francisco Franco Bahamonde, in his full name, the power to rule Spain as a dictator until his death in 1975.